Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome back to Vulnerability Weekly. Now, I mentioned in the Vulnerability Weekly this week that because of the importance and the impact of the recent breach on Uber, I will do an episode that is specifically dedicated to this particular breach because it was a particularly widespread in terms of access and pervasive and very highly debated. And I also mentioned that there's been a very negative attitude of specific vendor that has come out and say our product, our sales product will solve that. And this is a behavior called ambulance chasing that is particularly frowned upon in our industry because it's usually not true. And the incident response and an incident is usually caused by a number of factors. That is not only a tool, but also tool technology and process that fails in a chain of reaction. And it's usually much more nuanced that is fixed with my tool. Even if it's that the case, even if a tool could help in any possible way, and there are maybe some tool out there that could help with this analysis or prevention or detection, depending on which tool is in the attack chain, please don't do that. Please don't disclose that your tool fixed it, and please don't bombard the poor folks at Uber that right now are trying to get understanding the extent, the attack, what happened, and it is a very stressful time. So I beg everybody to respect those workers, those colleagues, and not to hammer them with this information. But without further ado, let's dive deeper into this episode. As I mentioned, I'll publish a post that is entirely my opinion, is entirely speculative with the information that I got hold on during this breach. There is this information that was scattered around. There was a lot of information, a lot of screenshots being released, and there've been a lot of noise around what could be solved and where and when. So, as I said, don't ambulance chase, don't try to extrapolate a little bits of information out of the data breach to actually say our product would have solved that with zero trust with other element. Even if that's the case, it wouldn't solve entirely the problem because usually the problem is process, procedures, technology, and people. And somewhere along those lines, something has failed or chain of things has failed, and one product doesn't solve it all. So I'm particularly pet peeve of mine not to do that. In terms of the attack, there's been speculation and news. What we know so far is that a particular threat actor has tried to log into the VPN connection of the internal intranet of Uber, and in order to do so, the VPN asked credentials, and credential stuffing was a technique used for attacking the specific VPN, but also because of the requirement of a multi-factor authentication, there is usually a second factor that is an SMS, a token, a physical token that you need to actually authenticate and authorize. The attacker have bombarded with authentication requests a worker and then called it, implementing a technique called social engineering, pretending it was an IT actor, and fundamentally calling the IT worker and mentioning, please, I'm an IT person from Uber, can you authorize this? This is a test that we're doing. And with that, it gained access to the internal system. Once it got hold of the internal system, the attacker started scanning fundamentally the environment, started trying to identify where things were, and specifically got hold of a network share in Google Drive that had a number of PowerShell scripts. Now, PowerShell scripts are usually tiny scripting language that are used to implement specific things. Python scripts are very similar. The only problem with this script is that they had the key of the kingdom and specifically keys of API credential of a key vault. And key vaults, Thycotic specifically in this particular case, is usually a security tool that is used to actually store credentials and store access to credentials. So that's a very well-known practice, but the challenge is those PowerShells stored a very privileged access key to this key vault instead of using more modern technique that is fundamentally requesting with a credential, the specific credential, and having each script having access to one specific credential. Because of the work, there was an API key that had access to the entire vault and all the other credentials. And once the attacker got hold of this particular embedded credential, then it got access to the key vault and access to the keys of the kingdom. And it basically, there was everything. So it starts, we don't know exactly if there were particular keys of all the system, but the user and the attacker start moving laterally all the way down to identifying fundamentally break glass access keys that are usually access key used in an emergency if system are offline or particularly key person are not reachable. And the challenge of this is that they usually highly privilege authentication credential to a lot of other systems. So with the key vault and the key store credential together with the break glass solution or keys, fundamentally the attacker had access to internal file share, HackerOne, Slack, and so on. And it went so ballsy, the attacker, that fundamentally start defacing internal sites, sending unsolicited pictures. Those are screenshots of the credentials accessed and the break glass access credentials. And the attacker had access to Slack, internal Slack, and self-declared himself as having access and fundamentally declaring that it was in HackerOne account or in vulnerability solution or Slack in itself. And the funny thing, or the non-funny thing, was that because the team at Uber was trained fundamentally to social engineers or to certain attack, it took this as an internal exercise or as a joke. So they start joking with the attacker that declare himself, I am an attacker, I'm here to actually, because again, unauthorized privilege. And there was a little bit of a panic moment when that was declared and the HackerOne account was exploited and it was declared because fundamentally the attacker was ignored. And the security team actually got to discover this and try to beg for people to log off Slack to actually mitigate the attack. And there is no easy solution in this. You can't disconnect Slack overall. You can close an account, but then you cause a ripple effect. And this is particularly the challenge that you have in a lot of these events. When there are a sequence of events, then maybe this is particularly unprecedented because traditionally you don't simulate this. And traditionally you have playbook and simulation books where you can scenario-based walk through this so that people and security team get exercise in those training events. But this was particularly unprecedented and the chain of attack was particularly unique so that they weren't fire drills basically on this. And the team was caught a little bit off shock and they're still investigating what was the consequence, where was it, and it was particularly bad because it was public, it was very public attack. The information was disclosed, there were several articles written about it, and I wanted to break fundamentally the stigma that please leave the security team at Uber to do their job, and I'm looking forward to have the retrospective and the analysis of the Uber breach because we can all learn from it. Internally, we reviewed our process procedure, the exercise on the back of this, and we try to understand if this something like this happened, how, who, and when will be disclosed and who will be alerted and how will we react. And I have to admit, we found internally the flaws and some break in the process and procedure that we quickly identified and resolved. So everybody could be affected by something like this. So please take the learning exercise and the learning lesson that we get from this breach, don't amble and chase, but apply that internally, do a little bit of Scrum review with your own dev team and internal team with the security team. And please take lesson learned from this, because everybody can be hacked. So don't attack Uber by saying that they're not attackable or they did bad security practice. Maybe there was some misconfiguration, but everybody can fall victim to this attack, especially after COVID, when everybody is exhausted. So it requires a particular attention on the internal process and procedure when everybody's overworked, stressed, and isolated sometimes, and leads into this potential issue and breach. So I hope this was informational. I hope this was useful as a lesson learned from everybody, but also something that we can all fall victim for, and use it as a lesson, review your internal process, and stay safe out there and stay paranoid and alert, because this is something that everybody could be facing. This is Francesco Cipollone. This is purely my opinion and the speculation based on the information. Follow us on the link that I shared below for full detail about the disclosure. And I'm going to keep on updating this series and the link with the latest information that I can get hold of. So I hope this was useful for everybody. Please subscribe or visit us at www.appsecphoenix.com. Stay safe out there and stay foolish. Thank you. Goodbye.